welcome back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And we are jumping in today with our first topic. This is a Relevant magazine article, and I'm sure there's a million other articles about this, but it's about the nonstop revival that took place at Asbury University.
Is still taking place as of today.
Well, they're moving it.
Yeah.
It said, to other locations in central Kentucky or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's still going on, just not in the same location. But the summary of the article, it says a revival broke out at Asbury University in Louisville, Kentucky 2 weeks ago. It started on February 8th during their chapel service and continued day and night until February 19th. It started with students, professors, and individuals from local churches. But since then, people have traveled from other states and even other countries to join in on the revival. Many have compared to the revival to another revival that started at Asbury University in February of 1970 and lasted for 144 hours. Photos from the revival show the chapel packed with people, as well as people standing out in the cold waiting to join in on the revival. The little chapel was filled with testimonies, scripture reading, prayers, and songs of worship for 11 days, and now many are asking for this to start happening in other places in the world. So what do you guys think about this revival and all the attention it's been getting?
Everybody looking at me.
Yep.
You can't tell, but everybody just turned to me.
I think it's complicated, so it's hard to know where to start.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
So let me, I like to look at so many things. I want my life. I want to look at the world through good eyes and generous eyes. And I don't want to be cynical. Like, I really don't, even though I'm bent that way. So, I mean, I have read a lot about this. I've watched a lot of videos and testimonials about what's going on at Asbury. And I, even though like the language of revival is a little out of my tribe and out of my wheelhouse when it comes to faith, like there seems to be so many awesome things that are happening. And I'm not looking at this like this is like a charlatan setting up camp to scam a bunch of people. I mean, for one, this is mostly student-led. There have been attempts from Christian celebrities or Christian white nationalists and political people to come in and set up camp. And the staff of Asbury are like, no, we're not doing this. Students are leading worship, not you, Chris Tomlin, not you, Carrie Job, all this thing. And that's beautiful. And I love that this is a faceless event, that this is about Jesus and awakening to him more than it is a centralized strongman leader. That is a beautiful thing that we should stop and be like, yeah, something special is happening there, because that doesn't happen in American Christianity. It's awesome. I love that it is not centered around everybody, all eyes on a person talking, but it's individual and corporate at the same time. And so I think there's just so many awesome things about it that are happening. And I'm not going to be one to just be like, well, we should shut it down. I mean, I think if there's one thing that like we see Jesus doing is in the Gospels is he's often talking to people in a new way and doing a new thing, and people that are in the old way don't want to have anything to do with the new thing that Jesus is doing, and those guys are wrong, you know. Jesus talked about new wine has to be in new wineskins, not old wineskins. And so I don't want to be 10 years from now being like I was the guy saying, oh, shut it down, get off my yard kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of beautiful things happening in it that is just not my stream. Now, some of the complicated things that I have towards it is kind of like the exit strategy of an event like this. And again, I've not experienced and lived through this, but what happens sort of after the Sunday high into Monday morning, and whenever this thing comes down, what is the fruit that is ultimately produced? What's that going to look like? Because I do not believe, and do not misconstrue my words thinking that this is just an emotional event, even though emotions are involved with everything. But you do have an emotional high aspect to something like this going on for a long time. And what happens when the emotions aren't through the roof anymore and you have to go and mow your yard? You have to deal with the cashier. You have to go back to work. And my hope, and I'm hoping and I'm thinking with good eyes here that, that this would be something that would not shut down just because the high is not happening anymore. Yeah. The other side that I'm just always wanting to like push into when there are these kind of powerful cultural moments that I struggle with sometimes is like the let's go see it like the tourism to it. Like God is doing something unique and special in this one place. Like the air is different in this one place, which seems like a very non-New Testament idea, where it seems like at Pentecost, the Spirit of God went to people and they went everywhere. And it was about this movement that happened and spread out. I'm hopeful that this is something that moves out and doesn't just stay in this small town in Kentucky. And I'm hopeful, and if you've gone to see and be a part of it, I'm not throwing shade at you, but I'm hopeful that it's less of a thing of like, let's go see and experience and get our ticket to the revival to experience this thing, and more of how do we spread this awakening to God's love and his presence everywhere. And that's where I'm a little bit like, what's Monday morning look like? And what does it look like for us not to descend on this one place like this is the temple? When Jesus like flipped it all upside down and says, no. Actually, it's Paul, but he says, no, this is not the temple anymore. You're the temple of God. Where you go, my presence, my love, my grace goes. And so that's an interesting thing. And another reality, I saw somebody on Twitter who's kind of a contrarian voice sometimes, but they pointed out that, real revival doesn't look like something that happens in a church service, but it looks like love happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our local churches. He pointed to some famous scripture that Dr. King spoke of often in the minor prophet of Amos, chapter 5, starting in verse 21. This is what the voice of God says through Amos the prophet. I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Love the imagery there. Almost smell it. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, all good things, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. What is God's heart really after? Not just the emotional high of a worship service, not just the air being different in one space, but he wants it to affect the way we treat our neighbors, affect the way we treat our cashiers and the people that service at restaurants, the people that don't have anything to offer us. That's what matters to the heart of God. And so my deep prayer for this thing that's happening in Wilmore, Kentucky, is that it's something that is an awakening of people to God's love, and then it spreads to other places. And that spreading to other places doesn't look like we have to pop up worship services everywhere, but it looks like people treating people like they do have the image of God in their life, and that they are valued, not because of what they do, but because of what Jesus says about them and who they are. So yeah, I'm bent a little cynical. I'm really trying to think wider in this and believe the best, and there have been a lot of great reports about this, so I just have a lot of questions at the same time.
That's me. I am also typically bent a little more cynical, unfortunately. And so, do I think there are people who are coming from the outside to Asbury learning about the love of Jesus and deciding, to follow him with their whole heart? I believe so. Do I think there are people who are probably, some of them, like you mentioned, getting a little caught up in everything that's going on, or, going there so they can post on social media and say, oh, I was at this, thing. I'm sure there probably, is that happening as well. But, kind of like you, I hope that people who have been there or are currently there then like take this out. But also like the people who are looking at this from the outside in, maybe there's people who are looking at it who don't believe, who are now asking questions like, what the heck is this about? Why would these people be doing this? Like, who are they even following? So, I don't know. Maybe it'll cause some people to ask some questions and dig a little deeper and kind of figure out what they believe. You know what I mean? So I don't know. But yes, I'm also, there's just, it's so complicated.
Yeah. What about you, Abby? What are your thoughts overall? I mean, it's been all over social media, over all the major networks. Like, this is a huge thing that's happening in our culture, and as people of faith, like, it's like, oh, it's interesting because this isn't really my thing,
right?
But what do we think about it, and what could come from it?
Yeah, I'm a little cynical too. I mean,
we are the worst. By the way.
We are terrible. We're terrible. But I mean, I went to a Christian university, and I don't know, maybe it was just the department I was in, but we weren't a fan of chapel. So like the fact that this chapel service went on for 11 days and stuff, it's just crazy.
It doesn't sound like heaven. It sounds more like hell. Is what you're saying.
Sounds like students wanting to get out of class for a week. No, I don't know.
Yeah. So like the cynical side of me is like, okay, these students are trying to get out of something by going to this chapel service for 11 days. And I'm sure not everyone stayed there the entire time. But I mean, there's that. And then also just people saying that they want this to start other places in the world. And it's not something you can force, is my other thing. Is there's just seems to be a lot of people that are like, oh, I want this to happen in my hometown or at my church or my school. And it's not something that you can force. It's not something that you can manufacture and it be authentic.
That's a really good point. Yeah, and there's that thin line between leadership and manipulation and manufacturing or feeling like God's called me to help do this. And you hope that the right spirit is in it as these things start in other places and that it's not like, well, we need to make it just like Asbury.
Right.
You know, that's not the case.
Yeah, I did see an article or something from I think it was the police chief in Wilmore that was like, our infrastructure was not set up for all of these people. And so he's like, this has been overwhelming. We're directing people like out of town because like this is a town of 6,000 people, which is, you know, if you're listening from Kokomo, which is where we are, like that is so small even compared to us. And we look at ourselves kind of as a small town. So it's like, I just can't imagine people from all over the world descending on our small town even. So, it's crazy in a lot of areas.
Again, with the more positive light, I mean, I've heard some of the people of the community say that people have been kind and they've actually like, they've not come in and trashed the place.
Yeah.
It's not like somebody comes in for a concert in Woodstock and it wasn't that. So, way to go. Hopefully there is more of a justice and kindness and outside focus that comes out of this because, you know, it's one of the things that it's a fact of the universe. It's a fact of the way of Jesus is that an internal experience with God's love, a real one, is expressed through love to other people. And it can't just be all about the good warm fuzzies you feel about yourself. That's not the real deal. Jesus says that people will know that you're my disciples, not by how loud we sing, how many church services we go to, how much we give, not that, but by the way that you love one another. And so I'm encouraged by that, and I hope that we continue to hear more stories like this, whatever happens next.
So our next topic is about the Super Bowl ad, He Gets Us. If you hadn't seen it, it's one just saying that Jesus gets us. He's here for us, and he's here for people. But the article is titled, He Gets Us Super Bowl Ad Brought Back Bad Memories. This is a religion news article by Kirsten Powers. The author starts this article by talking about attending what she called a seeker-friendly church in 2009. She felt safe and in a place she belonged because they didn't preach about their political beliefs or push any radical theological views. All the focus was on Jesus and trying to be more like him. It was after years of attending that she slowly found their core teachings had conservative roots that she didn't agree with. She compared He Gets Us and their Super Bowl advertisements to this church. He Gets Us puts the focus on Jesus, but keeps their donors private. Kristen points out that the few donors who are public are conservative and support conservative causes, which she argues isn't a problem as long as they have donors who are non-conservative too. But the organization does not provide public information about them other than their website saying, funding for He Gets Us comes from a diverse group of individuals and entities with a common goal of sharing Jesus' story authentically. She says the people running seeker movements hide what they actually believe. They focus on the things that will draw people in, and that, ironically, ultimately plays a tiny, if not non-existent role in informing their lives or how the church runs. Once the person is embedded in the community and totally bought into a specific version of Christianity, the real beliefs are casually mentioned like they've been saying this all along, and makes you feel like you're losing your mind. So what do you think about the author saying that this ad contained seeker-friendly tactics?
I mean, talk about cynical. That's my take. And I actually really appreciate Powers' writing. I think she writes really eloquently about faith and culture and stuff. So, but I saw a lot of this around the Super Bowl time, just about this ad campaign. And I mean, for me personally, I thought the ads were powerful. I thought they were well done. I think that the message of He Gets Us is a powerful message that I try to communicate with my life and work, that like, you know, Jesus was like us and that we have more in common with him. And he is our greatest ideal for what the human experience actually is like, and we should look more at him. So So yeah, I think that she has kind of a cynical take on the ads. And I don't think that we do this with very many things where we want to see the donors behind everything, where we want to we need 3 liberals and 3 conservatives. Like, I mean, there are conservatives and liberals in every church, or there should be, politically diverse group. And there are these kind of things and businesses and things. You don't check these things at the door. So, I get that. And also, I'm a little defensive over the phrase, seeker friendly, or it used to be called seeker sensitive back in the 80s and 90s as well, because I think overall that's a lot of what I try to create in our faith community. We want to be a place where if you're seeking, if you're curious, this is a safe place for you to explore. I don't think that we aim to drop the hammer down unexpected later about it, where it's kind of like a bait and switch.
Yeah, I was like,
And there are probably faith communities that do that, but I don't think that comes in hand with trying to connect with real people that have real questions with this real Jesus. So, I thought the commercials were powerful. I don't know how effective they were. I think the only people I heard talking about how great they were Christians, personally. So there was that. So I don't know about the effectiveness of dropping all the money into a Super Bowl ad campaign, but also I'm more optimistic about they were trying to do something to get the message out, and we're going to try, and people are going to try different ways, and I don't think it was wrong personally what they did, and I think the ads communicated some eternal truth about Jesus. So I think that this was a little painted cynical, but at the same time she's speaking from a personal experience and feeling the bait and switch aspect of some churches and faith communities, and I think it's still good to listen to that experience and learn from it and make sure that we're not perpetuating a narrative where we are get them in the door with the free popcorn and the the other fun things that we do to get them here, the cool music and the slick graphics and stuff, and then we'll hammer on, tell them how terrible they are and how they're going to hell. So, we don't want to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think if I take a step back and I want to empathetically think about her experience, then I get where she's coming from in that. I just did not read it that way and experience it that way.
Well, and I just feel like it's always wise to do your own research, right? So whether it's sharing something on social media because you agree or disagree with the headline, but you haven't actually read the article, all the way to choosing a church. It's nice to go where your friends go or whatever, but it's more important to already know what they believe and how they live that out. So I don't know, for me, again, this not my good eye, but I feel like if you do that in advance, there's not that bait and switch opportunity. You already know what you're walking into, what they believe. And so I don't know. I kind of want to throw a little bit of that back on her. And, but at the same time, I don't, and maybe you can answer this, Joel, I don't know. But okay, so if a church is not seeker friendly, then what are they? What kind of church is not seeker friendly? Because that also seems gross. I don't know. So, I'm I don't.
That's a really great
know.
question. And I don't know why. I think we confuse and conflate the idea of seeker friendly with not deep or they're just surface kind of level kind of things. And I like the phrase seeker sensible. It's not that we don't talk about certain things, but we want to make sure that somebody who doesn't have a Sunday school background knows what we're talking about and where we are. Yeah. And that's a really great question. If a church is not friendly to people seeking out a authentic faith and a faith in this Jesus, then what are we even doing?
Right.
Is it this weird holy huddle kind of club? I think that's a really great question, and I don't really I don't have a ton of experience with people that would say that they're not trying to help people that are seeking faith. And I think more she's speaking more to the tactics of doing something to get people in that bait and switchy kind of thing, to where they're you're welcome here, then you have to come to our 6-week membership class, and you have to cancel your HBO membership and sign this pledge for this amount of money forever, or you're out, and all those different kind of things that I think sometimes exist in churches. I remember my parents always told me the story of when they were looking for a new church. Somebody came and visited visited them after they came to the church one time.
Yep.
And my dad had HBO on in the background, and the guy's like, well, that's not going to work. And my dad goes, well, this is not going to work.
Not gonna work.
And that was the last time they talked to me that church, to be a part of that church. And I think that's a real thing, and there's probably still ghosts of that around. And so I imagine that's it. I just, I personally thought that it was, they were tastefully done, and you know, if it can get, if we can just get the more and more of the conversation around the person of Jesus, and not all the wrapping around it or the trappings around church and evangelical Christianity, which is more like a voting block today than it is a movement. I think that's a healthy thing. So that's what I was sort of thinking about.
And I understand where she's coming from, especially like if it's a church or an organization that you're getting involved in. But for just an advertisement, I don't think, unless you're planning on donating to them or you're planning on volunteering for them or something, I don't think you need to worry too much about where their funding is coming from. I mean, I understand that with a church or something, because if you are conservative and find out that they are, you know, very liberal,
spending $400 million,
and that might upset you. But, you know, with just an advertisement, it's not as big of a deal as she might make it out to be. But I do love her heart behind it and love her writing too.
And I think it's just a good watchword for all of us not to do the bait and switch kind of thing. Like we do things out of genuine love and inviting an invitation to people, but not like to get them in, and then once we get them in, we'll make this transactionary thing to where they cross some kind of line from death to life. We get another notch in our spiritual belt because of it. Gross, right? That's not the game that we want to be playing.
Well, and I don't necessarily, I mean, kind of play devil's advocate. Like, I don't think Jesus needs a PR guy or commercials necessarily, you know, but because I feel like that's who we are. You know what I mean? Like, we are the people that are talking to your neighbor or your coworker or whatever. Yeah, maybe they see a Super Bowl commercial and then they have questions or whatever. And maybe because you have already talked to them or they've seen the way you live or whatever, they'll come to you and ask. But like, Jesus PR commercials, I don't know. I'm here for it. I'm try anything, you know.
We should.
But I feel like we're kind of Jesus's PR team in a sense.
Preach, like, Allison. That's good. We should put it out of.
Put it on a T-shirt. No, I'm just kidding.
No, don't do that.
Joking. Absolutely not.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and then Jeff Newton from Kokomo Urban Outreach is going to be joining us here on the back half. Woohoo!
Well, we are so excited now to welcome Jeff Newton to the podcast. We've had a short list of guests of local leaders and heroes in our community, someone who's done incredible work with their life and working with this intersection of their faith and purpose and calling. And Jeff was at the short list for sure of having a guest. Jeff is the founder of Kokomo Urban Outreach. He is a pastor in the United Methodist Church, a recently retired pastor in the United Methodist Church. And I've had the privilege of serving alongside of Jeff for many years now. And so, excited to share him with all of our listeners. So, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here. It's great to be here. It's an exciting day for me.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So, we'll get into it.
So I actually want to start off the conversation by you explaining what Kokomo Urban Outreach is for those who don't know.
Okay. Well, Kokomo Urban Outreach is a nonprofit organization, and currently we're working with teenagers and children across the city of Kokomo. Okay. And also, can you tell us about your journey in Kokomo and what began Kokomo Urban Outreach? Sure. I'm a United Methodist pastor, retired, and I was serving a church in Northwest Indiana, and I'm from Kokomo, and so I felt God calling me to come back to Kokomo. I wasn't really sure why, so I would take my vacations and come to Kokomo and pray. I'd walk up and down the streets and pray. And as I was walking up and down the streets praying, I could see the fronts of houses in my mind, fronts of houses falling down. I could see inside, and I saw a lot of hurt and pain and distress and chaos and all kinds of things happening. And I realized, I heard the Holy Spirit speak to me and say, those people you're seeing in those houses are never going to go to church. The church has to come to them. And so that changed my perception of what a pastor is about kind of, and what churches should be doing, actually. Mm-hmm. And so I heard also that I was supposed to come back to Kokomo and help churches get out of their buildings and get into neighborhoods. And I said, God, I can't do that. I don't know enough pastors. I don't know. I've been gone a long time. And I heard, if not you, then who? So we made this big change to come to Kokomo. We left a large church. I was pastoring a fairly large church, more of a traditional church, but they had like 5 choirs and all kinds of staff and all kinds of things like that. And I left that to start Kokomo Urban Outreach, come to Kokomo.
Come back to your hometown.
Come back to my hometown.
Oh, my goodness. Did you argue with God at all about that?
I did. And there was times I felt like I was in the belly of a fish, even though I was here.
You're like, and everybody has a complicated relationship with your hometown. Like, I feel this, like, doing ministry in my hometown. Like, there's things that you're like, oh, it's so annoying, and there's a way you kind of want to prove yourself outside of your hometown. But you understand your hometown, and you understand it inside and out, and that's a gift that someone who just moves into a community would never actually have. Like, I get the ins and outs of it. I think that was something that you could use to your advantage coming back.
Exactly. That's why I didn't really hesitate. I'd rather come here than anywhere else if I'm going to do what I'm just going to do. Because I did know people and I knew the culture.
So tell us how the outreach started, like 2005. Yeah.
We started with Katrina hit.
With the Hurricane Katrina, was that in New Orleans? New
Orleans and Mississippi. We had most of the people came from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So people were coming into Kokomo from hurricane-ravaged areas, and some couldn't rebuild. Some didn't have insurance, they couldn't rebuild. So they're coming to Kokomo, and we're kind of connecting with their family members in Kokomo. So I had this idea that maybe we could help them relocate here. So we opened a warehouse where they could come and get furniture and clothes and appliances and even food. And then I recruited churches to adopt the family, and they paid their first month's rent, they paid their deposit. Wow. They got them to the doctors. They got them registered in school, bought the school supplies, did all that. They just surrounded the person. And we relocated 25 families. Okay. So they were relocated. And then while that was going on, the church I was pastoring was right across the street from public housing, Garden Square. And we began to invite kids over to the building to eat on a Sunday night.
To have a meal,
because we heard that kids were not eating very well. So we brought them across, and we did Sunday night so they could have food in their stomachs, so they can sleep well on Sunday night, so they can go to school Monday ready to go to school. And then we also put them in like little Bible classes. Yeah. So we did that at the beginning. That's the way it kind of got started, and then it just kind of snowballed, and we ended up. First, we had that location, so I said we should go somewhere else, and pretty soon we had many locations across the city that were feeding sites. And then we also had food pantries across the city. We had rolling food pantries that went to neighborhoods. We had weekend food bags. We delivered 1,500, we call them buddy bags, delivered into the schools every single week. And
with like some food over the weekend so kids would eat at home over the weekend.
Because we were feeding kids in person, but we were missing kids that couldn't get there. Yeah. So we did that. So we did all that for a lot of years. And we actually there were many churches that came out of their buildings, some for the first time, and began to work with the kids in the neighborhoods.
Yeah, I remember that I was at a church in town, and I was sort of fresh into vocational ministry, and I remember 99.98% of all the time my work was thinking about what was happening in the building on Sunday morning. And I remember being invited to go to one of the neighborhoods in Kokomo and serve a Sunday night meal, and it was a formative experience for me, getting outside of the walls of a church and doing some good and meeting people and rubbing shoulders with people and serving people I'd never have the chance to on a Sunday morning. And so that was going on all over the place.
Right. It was a kind of incredible because in some of the locations there was multiple churches, so like lots of small churches that came together. Mm-hmm. And you just had to be committed the whole year, basically the whole summer at least. And so they came, and we had Pentecostals working next to Baptists. That was a miracle.
Oh, that is a miracle.
That's right? Pentecost.
Right? Yeah, people that probably don't agree on much about theology.
Right. So they worked together, and it was all good.
That's a little stuff of heaven right there. Get used to dealing and serving with people that are different than you, right?
So that's how we kind of got started, and then it just kind of snowballed along the way.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. So there's a lot of conversation and disagreement about the nature of poverty in America. You lead workshops to help people understand poverty. Can you give us some of your key insights and misunderstandings about poverty?
Sure. probably one of the biggest misunderstandings about poverty is the fact that a lot of people believe people in poverty are lazy. And they'll say things like, just get a job. Or if you would just quit smoking, or if you would just do not this.
Look at your big TV.
Yeah, look at your big TV. And there are issues in poverty where people have to figure things out, but at the same time, they're not really lazy. And a lot of they say, pull up your bootstraps. That's what I did. Well, you have to have some boots to pull them up. And when I do the poverty workshop, we have a lot of older people sometimes come and they will say, well, my grandparents back during the Depression, nobody had anything, and they took care of it. Well, they had gardens and they knew what to do.
People don't even know.
No, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can't plant a garden in a housing complex. Yeah. So, so that's one misconception you have about people in poverty. Another one is that there's a misconception that people are taking advantage of the system. So you're a taxpayer.
Oh, yeah, I heard that a lot.
Take advantage of the system. When in fact, in Howard County, for example, the county we're in, there's about 80,000 people, and there's about 6,000 families that receive food stamps.
6,000 out of 80,000 people.
Well, 6,000 families.
Gotcha.
I don't know how many families,
Yeah.
but there's that many people. So they receive the food stamps, and they were able to buy their food. And so there's 6,000 people like that. And then there's something called welfare, and that's welfare to work. And people believe everybody gets a welfare
check, right?
You got a check.
You get government money dropped to you every month or something like that.
Right.
That's the narrative I think I was raised thinking.
Right.
They're living off of welfare.
Right. And yeah. So you get this. You can have a card now, so it gets loaded. It gets loaded once a month. So the idea is that you're going to pay for your rent and all the things you can't, to kind of sustain you. And so the belief is that everybody's on welfare, when in fact that's not true.
Oh.
Not at all. There's 6,000 families that way. There's about between 100 and 200, I can't remember the exact number, but very few families on welfare.
Really?
Wow.
Less than 200 people? Like
Less
families on welfare?
Less than 200.
Wow.
And do you know how much they make a month? If you're on welfare, you get the generous check of $180 average in our community.
Wow.
So you get $180 for that, plus your food stamps. That's what you got. And you get housing, but you have to use the money to pay for the housing.
So then food stamps, explain how much money are you actually getting for a family
right.
in food stamps?
In the back of the day it was called food stamps. Now they're called, it's called SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. And the key word there is supplemental. It's never meant to buy all your food. You have to supplement it some way. And a lot of people supplement it through food pantries. Right, so when you have food stamps, you get $1 per meal per person per day usually. It was higher than that during COVID, but that's gone away.
$1 per person per meal.
So
per day.
You get if you have a single mom with 2 kids, you get $3 for breakfast, $3 for lunch, $3 for dinner. And some mothers, single moms, if you have children under a certain age, you can get WIC, so you get additional food, but that only lasts a little bit,
so
a few years.
I mean, you think about, this just plays into the nutrition conversation we have in our country too. If you have parents that are trying to figure out, well, I've got $3 per meal, they're not getting any fresh fruits or vegetables or cooking anything fresh. They're doing processed food because you just need to get something into your children's stomach, right? And that just leads into all different kinds of issues. But it's not like anybody, especially with rising grocery prices that we've all experienced, there's no way that is you being able to live off of that. It's a supplement just a little bit of a supplement at best. That's
right. And so a lot of times our kids are living off potato chips and things like that. There's a obesity problem. There's diabetes problems because of the food that's being eaten. And a lot of times kids are given potato chips on the weekend, just a handful, because that's all they have. And there was a time when we first started the outreach where kids were getting a lot of chicken at school, and they were eating a lot of chicken at home, and the chickens had hormones in them. So that kids were going through puberty like at 10 years old. And they didn't know what to do. It was crazy because of the growth hormones in the chicken breasts.
Yeah.
And the nuggets came into
all that fresh nuggets.
Yeah. So there was a big struggle. They've kind of backed away from the hormones, so we're not seeing that right now.
Yeah.
As we did in the past.
So coming back to the misconceptions, like, that most people in poverty are not lazy, that they're not getting hundreds and hundreds of dollars of government assistance. What else is one of those main misconceptions that many people have about people that are living in poverty?
Another one is to just go get a job. That's something.
Yeah, because everybody's hiring, right?
Everybody's hiring.
Why don't they just go get a job?
Why don't they go get a job? And they do. That's the thing. People don't realize that if you're on welfare, that you have only 5 years to be on it, because President Clinton and Congress passed a law called Welfare to Work, and so you have to drop off after 5 years. And the fifth year, you have to be volunteering in a nonprofit and then doing job searches for 40 hours a week to get paid $180 a month. So those people quickly find a job.
So it's more of the working poor.
It really is.
People that are working low-wage jobs, terrible retail hours, and doubling up those jobs. I mean, that's really who we're talking about.
Right. And so think about being a single mom and you're in a convenience store and you're the only one there, and your kid gets sick at daycare. You can't leave.
Yeah. You
can't go. And then what do you do?
Just to put yourself in those shoes, that's enough.
Right. Or your kid gets in trouble at school.
Yeah.
And they say, you got to get here right now. Mm-hmm. What do? You can't leave your job because you don't have a key to the door.
Yeah. So
how are you going to do that? They can lock themselves in, but they can't lock from the outside. So it's crazy. But then a lot of parents have two jobs. There's two jobs, so you're gone all day and all night, and your kids are really raising themselves. And so it becomes an issue. So do I need to go to work and to take care of my kids, or to take care of my kids in person and go to work? And so you have this struggle back and forth. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when you finally are making it, something happens that pushes you back. Mm-hmm. So you're finally getting out of it, and then your car breaks down. And every bit of money you had saved to get a better apartment or somewhere is gone. So you got to start all over again. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot of times when I'm talking with people in poverty, I hear a lot of times, I'm going to be moving out of here in a year and a half. I don't think that far ahead. I mean, I don't even, if I know what I'm going to move generally, but I'm not thinking I'm going to go somewhere else in a year and a half. I don't think that way.
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of weird. And then the year and a half comes and they usually can't do what they wanted to do because they weren't able to save what they thought they could save. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a circle.
I mean, there's so many systemic issues that lead to this cycle as well. I mean, it's been about a year ago now, but I remember somebody bringing up, there's so much shift work in our community where people can work first, second, third shift, but there's really not shift daycare. So if you're a single mom, single parent, and you have an opportunity to make a great wage at Chrysler, a night shift, and you don't have family around here, what are you going to do with your kids? You just say no to that job, and you say no to that career path because you can't make it happen because you're a parent and you're going to take care of your kid first. So there's just all these situations that just helpful to even place ourselves into so we can at least experience empathy and think, man, that's a tough decision. Instead of just being at a distance, wagging our finger, being like, why don't you just go get a job, pull yourself up from your bootstraps, right? So, man, that's really helpful. I hope that some of this stuff helps us. Something we want to do on the podcast is help people think wider about these things and consider things beyond our lived experiences. And so I hope that helps.
One thing people in poverty they don't need another can of SpaghettiOs, another pair of used jeans. What they need is our networks. Mm. So if we're able to share our networks, or we're able to help them get into jobs, or help them fill out their resumes or applications, and then because we know them, present them to the employer and say, we know them.
We vouch for them. We know them. I've heard you say something along those lines before that, there's the old adage, don't give a man a fish, teach him how to fish. But you add...
sometimes there's no access to the pond.
They don't know how to get to the pond.
Right, or they're not allowed to be in the pond.
Yeah,
they're not allowed to go fishing in the pond.
Yes, and so that's where it's not just teach them how to fish, but they need to know how to get to the pond, how to have access. You need to sometimes stop a gatekeeper from keeping them out from the pond. I mean, I think that's a powerful difference in thinking about it.
So how did your understanding of poverty lead a strategy shift in Kokomo Urban Outreach a few years back?
Well, in about 2013, I began to see teenagers that we were helping with their families before. The teenagers are coming back to us with their babies, wanting the same help. Mm. And then I thought to myself, I don't think we're doing any good, because we're giving everything away, but it's not really helping. It's helping people get through poverty, but not out. So how do you get people out?
And there's a difference between just like meeting somebody in an emergency and getting them through, but actually lifting them out.
Lifting them out. How do you lift somebody out? And kind of the way that happened was I was praying, and I was on a cruise ship. In my mind, I was on a cruise ship, and a cruise ship has everything. So I would look down in the water, and there were people treading water, and I would say to them, what do you need? Hey, what do you need? And they would say food, and I threw them food. Or, hey, what do you need? Clothes, throw them clothes. Hey, what do you need? Gas cards. Hey, what do you need? Christmas presents. Whatever they needed, we threw to them. And after a while of treading water, they quit treading because they knew we were going to come back. And so I kind of put that aside. It was a prayer time. Then I was praying, and a couple weeks later, and as I was praying, I was led to Matthew 25, where Jesus says, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, all that. And I said, God, that's what we're doing. Why doesn't it feel right? Why do I feel so distressed? And I was directed just a little bit further to Matthew 25, verse 40, where Jesus says, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And then a couple weeks later, I was back on the ship, and I was praying, and I yelled down to the first person, hey, what do you need? And when they looked up at me, I saw Jesus' face, and I knew I would never throw Jesus anything. I would try to pull Jesus out. So that's where the shift began to happen. And it was a huge shift, because we actually dismantled years of things slowly. It didn't happen. We didn't like just pull the plug on everything. And then in my mind, I have to convince the board of directors. We've been going this certain direction. How do I even talk about it?
The donors that had kept the whole thing afloat, right? Like that we're giving to a food program mostly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we had all those issues. But along the way, God was leading us along the way, because at the time it didn't feel good. But we lost major funding for food just out of nowhere. And I thought, okay, I was pretty not happy about that. But then I thought, well, God's just helping me along the way here. So we really have no excuse, because something happened out of our control, and we can't control it, and we can't continue. So we had to close a lot of things down.
And then you were led and directed to this book that
Right.
was a huge game changer for the mission of the outreach, Toxic Charity. Tell us about that.
Toxic Charity.
You love it? It was a good read?
I know. I hated it. I threw it on the wall like 5 times.
Why is that?
Well, because in the book, he talks about everything that people that help people are doing wrong.
Yeah, we're actually hurting by the way we're helping.
By the way we're helping, we're hurting unintentionally. He did say that. It was not because you had bad intentions, because it was. And as I read the book, it was like a checklist of everything we were doing. And from his perspective, we were doing everything wrong. And I agree. I came to the same conclusion after a lot of struggle. And so we did a community read where we invited the whole community to read. And we read together with Bridges Outreach and Travis there. And we came together into a restaurant, and we had about 50 people show up that had read the book.
Wow.
We did it several times to get the whole book discussed. And then we saw a shift in our whole community begin to shift. There's still pockets of things going on. And you still have to have some pockets of safety nets. But that wasn't what I felt led to do. It wasn't to keep the safety nets together. It was yes, I want safety nets, but I didn't want to be the one doing that. I want to help people out.
Yeah, so what were some of the ways that the shift happened away from food into different programming to help generational poverty stop and help people out?
Our biggest change was we began to work with youth. We had a tornado that came through in 2016 and kind of devastated the community, the neighborhood that I was part of, that I live in, and our buildings in. So we had a lot of folks that were displaced, and we were trying to help them. And we wanted to we received quite a bit of money, and we wanted to clean up the neighborhood. And so we invited neighbors to come over and eat with us.
Yeah.
And as they were eating, I would say, so what's your biggest need? Just trying to figure out what their needs were. And the biggest need at the time was, we can't go to work because there's a tree on our car, or our work isn't there anymore. And we can't go to work. And we have a paycheck coming in 2 days, and then we don't have any. So what are we going to do? So I said, so what you need is money. Yes. So the past, what I would have done was I would have contacted people, which I did, and received a giant chunk of money, which I was able to. And then I would have just did like grants. Come in and let's fill out this paper and sign for it and tell me how many hours you work and how much you make, and we'll recover your money. I didn't do that. I wanted to do that, but I didn't do that. So what I did was I said, you can come in and you can work for us for $10 an hour. We're going to clean up the neighborhood. And so they came in droves. Mm-hmm. And so we began to clean up the neighborhood and paid everybody $10 an hour, up to $500. And then there were some people that were really working well. And so I asked one guy, I asked him one day, I said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? Because he was from the streets and poverty and all that. He said, I would take kids off the streets and show them how to work. Mm. I said, let's try that. So out of that came a program that we call Man Up. It was kind of running at the same time. We were closing things down, and this was coming up at the same time. So we're doing two things at once. So we started a work program for young men from the ages of 10 years old to 18. And then over time, it's expanded and it's grown, and we no longer have Man Up. We have something just called Up. After COVID, we had a girls program, boys program. We combined them, and so it's called Up, which stands for Unlimited Potential. And then we have little bitty kids, 3 years old to 9 years old, and they're called Mini Ups. Mm. And we teach them. We believe that to get out of generational poverty, and generational poverty is difficult to get out of because if you're in generational poverty, you don't remember ever being in middle class.
Yeah.
So you don't know what you're going back to. A lot of times we find ourselves, I've been in poverty before but didn't even realize it. I was passing out free cheese at my first church to all the neighbors, and then I went home, and then so I knocked on my door, you forgot your cheese. I said, well, I don't qualify for cheese. I said, yes, you do. You only make $50 a week. You do qualify. But see, I didn't think of myself that way because I knew I could get out.
Yeah, you had a vision. You had a vision of a middle class.
Right, and I was going to seminary, and I knew that if I had to, I could just stop it all and go right back to work. I'd be fine. So, and I knew what to do. So if you're 3 generations into poverty, you don't have a memory of that.
Wow.
So, so it's more difficult. So if you're working with kids and you teach them. We believe if you teach them a work ethic, it's kind of like a math equation. A work ethic plus life skills plus education is going to equal a self-reliant adult. So our goal is to make self-reliant adults by teaching work and life skills and make sure they have their education. So we're checking grades, all that kind of stuff, and giving tutors. Mm-hmm. So we work with about 300 kids every week.
Wow.
And they get tutored, they work, and they take life skill classes.
Yeah. I love that, UP, the Mini Up and UP program, it stands for Unlimited Potential. And I just love that when we're talking about an issue of poverty, which so often is like scarcity, they don't have enough, sort of in that language. You have really flipped that on its head to more of an abundance mindset of, there's actually untapped but unlimited potential in this next generation that have experienced generational poverty.
Yeah, we're trying to make the invisible that's inside of them visible. And the only way you could do that with a kid to make the invisible visible is, the best way to do that is give them things to try. And then you find things they're good at. So every kid goes to a life skill class and we can see what they're good at there. They're good in wood shop, and then some kids are, I hated that. That's okay, now you know what you don't like. And so we're able to, in the life skill classes, we're able to help them hone in on that. And then sometimes they hone in on their jobs. When they go out to work, I'm a great raker. Did you see the shrubs? I think I could trim shrubs. Those look really good. And so that's the kind of thing. So you're trying to pull things out of them.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow.
That's so cool. So you have this recent venture called Way Down Deep. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. Way Down Deep is a Facebook Live right now, program that me and my friend do every week, generally, if we don't have technical issues like last week. I'm on a roll here. Anyway, we have conversations, deep conversations, and the thing is, he is different than me.
In about every way, right?
In every way.
Yeah.
We have no interest the same. He is 33 years old. He's younger than my kids. My kids are older than him. He's 33 years old. I'm older. He's African American. He likes to be called black. I'm white. He is from the streets. He grew up doing lots of bad things. He struggled with food, just the whole bunch of things. Being raised by a single mom who was also addicted, and so it's difficult. He was never addicted, but she was. And so it's just really been, he had a difficult life. I had both my parents. We were middle class. My mom stayed at home and took care of us. My dad went to work. We went out to eat. Just normal things that a middle class family would do. And he has never experienced that. But I've never gone to a dumpster to find food either. He has. So having said all that, we're different that way. We have different opinions on things. But what we're trying to do in our little presentations is we're trying to model that you can disagree on things and still be friends.
Yeah.
The whole idea came from what I've been seeing in the country, this big division, and nobody can talk to each other without almost yelling at each other. And so we're trying to model that. So we agree on many things, we disagree on some things, and so even we're disagreeing, we're still kind.
Yeah, you can be gracious in disagreement, right?
You can.
You don't just turn your back on the other person,
right? You can't
ghost them,
right? Yeah. So that's what we're trying to model, and so we talk about topics. With any topic you want to ask us, we'll answer. Kareen is really good at working with kids. I used to be. But now I'm the old guy on the yard saying, "Get out of my yard!" Not really. I really not. That's what he says I am.
Yeah.
You're an old guy. But so we just do this together. We just discuss things, and we've done some live events. We've been to churches across central Indiana. We've been to several. And we let them ask us questions. We have things we can talk about. Yeah. And then we have, so we just go around and speak.
What I love about it is how it's sort of modeling a different way than what we're seeing in the media, and the different way that I think that our country is, the path that our country is going down, which is either avoidance, and I just won't ever talk to these people again because they're different. We just had a congresswoman yesterday say that we should, as a country, should get divorced, and red states and blue states should be a different country.
I saw that.
And I was like, how's that going to work, right? But that's one path, and and then the other path is to just hate each other and be at war with each other all the time. And it just reminds me of the third way of Jesus often, which is to believe and be different and be countercultural, but you can do it in a winsome, kind way, and you're always moving towards the other, not away from the other. And I love that. So we're going to link that show in our host notes or our notes on the podcast, and love to get some more eyes and ears on it. And so really awesome. Jeff, thanks so much for your time, man. Thanks for having this conversation. Man, you're an inspiration to me. I've loved being able to work alongside of you at the Outreach for years now, and to continue to see the good stuff, that the wake of God's kingdom stuff sort of behind you and what you've been up to is really incredible. So thanks so much for your time today, man. Well, thank you for inviting me in. What I appreciate about your church here at Bridgeway is that you're very outward focused. You're all about getting out of the building. Mm-hmm. And I like that a lot. That attracts me to this kind of a ministry, because that's what I've been trying to get churches to do forever. Wow, that means a lot. That means a lot. Thanks so much. Thank you. We got room to grow. We're going to keep growing in that way, but that means a lot. Yeah, cool. Absolutely. If you have questions, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com, or if you have topics you want us to talk about, people you'd like us to talk to like Jeff, you can send those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at atypicaltalkpod. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.